So today we've got Jennifer Wilson. Excuse me, I'm trying to work my way through a bit of delay that I've had for myself, so it's throwing me off a bit. So we got Jennifer Wilson here. We're here at Wilson Nurseries. She's going to be talking to us a bit about container gardening and container plants. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to her so she can give you a little background about the nurseries.
Okay, well, good morning, or maybe afternoon by now. We're actually at our Frankfurt location today. So we're just right outside the greenhouses here on the East-West Connector in Frankfurt. Quick history, we've been here for 42 years. I guess this is our 42nd, maybe even our 43rd year. And then we're in Lexington, also on the corner of Todd's Road and Palumbo. And we're actually building some new greenhouses there as we speak. So here in the next 30 days or so, you can visit the greenhouses there as well as those here. So really, we're kind of in the full swing of spring, 1 or 2 more cooler nights. So that's something to consider. If you're going to go shopping in the next day or two, then keep that in mind. Keep everything covered up tonight. We'll be covering things tonight. We keep the greenhouse warm at night by dropping our plastic and keeping everything warm by night, and then we open it up in the morning and let everything air out. But I think we're looking at about 39 degrees tonight here in Franklin County anyway. We looked at Lexington real close too, and it's about the same. So 39 is not going to freeze anything, of course, but some things really aren't going to be happy. Some things more than others are going to be sensitive to the cool. But in any case, it's time to plant. We look at it as tomorrow night, Friday night, once the 39 passes, then I don't think we have anything less than about 45, maybe even 46 in the forecast. And then next week, we're looking up into the 50s at night. And I think I even saw 78 degrees for next week. So we're there, and hopefully it won't turn too hot too quick on us, and we'll have a nice ease into summer. But it's time to plant no matter what. And finally, because this has been a tricky year, actually, plenty of warm followed by a little bit of cold, and plenty of warm and a little bit of cold. So you can get out there. Hopefully you've cleaned out your beds and done some of that preparation, but you can really get out there now and put stuff out. Even the tender stuff, you'll be okay. So container gardening is a big topic, but it's a good one. And, nothing really kind of finishes things off like a container, a well-placed, nice container, a well-placed, well-planted container. If you've got your beds planted and all that, then it's a finishing touch that you can do. And really, if you don't want to plant annuals in beds, I don't, and I own a nursery, so I usually don't ever plant any annuals in my beds. But I do plant, I have a lot of perennials that, of course, come up every year, and then I pop my containers everywhere around there. So really, the thing about container gardening is you can go anywhere with it. It's a massive topic. You can do about anything in a container if you choose the right container. You can go anywhere from teeny tiny to giant, and I've got a few pretty big ones set up here. So I'm going to try to show you some tricks, and we're going to start talking about containers. And containers these days are plentiful. You can find containers that are made of, like this pot right here is something that we love. We do occasionally sell them, but we grow in this. This is a cord fiber pot. And what I love about cord fiber is it's biodegradable, but you can get several years out of it. This has a waxy coating on it. And what I love is you can plant this, and then I have some urns kind of out in front of me that you can just drop it into. So it's an easy way to do it. And we grow a lot of these. We'll pre-plant them for you, and then you can drop them straight in if you don't want to do your own thing. So anywhere from paper pots, which is really what that is, into, this is a terracotta here. This is glazed pottery. So really choosing your pot, you can go anywhere. You can go into concrete, plastics. The tricky part about pots is everything's just going to react a little bit differently. So if you are planting in terracotta, for example, the terracotta is going to pull water away from your plants. At the same time, it does tend to hold some water, but it's an active part of the container garden. Whereas if you have a plastic pot, the plastic is not taking water or giving water or anything. It's really just kind of a vessel only. So it's not really an active part of container gardening. The cord actually plays a little bit of a role because it is an organic product, and it does kind of, it's a special way of growing in it. It holds a little bit of water for you. Concrete is just kind of sitting there doing its own thing. And a big consideration, and we get this question a lot, is can I leave my pots out in the winter? Maybe you're not thinking that way right now, but come October, November, you will be. So really, you choose your pots according to what you want to do with them in the winter. For the most part, there is like, this is a really great frost-proof pottery here, but for the most part, we tell everyone, if you can, take your pots inside in the winter. I'll be honest, I don't. I leave my pots outside if I get a good 4 or 5 years out of them, because I just look at them in October or November and I just think, no way, nope, you're not coming inside. So, but know that the better quality pot that you get, and the what it's made of is really important. And some, like concrete, you can leave out, but it's still not recommended that you do. So it's best always to take them inside. And as an alternative, you can cover them, which isn't the prettiest thing, but you can. And then also lifting them up a little bit is always a good thing, whether it's spring or whether it's winter, but lifting them up a little bit on little pot feet. We have a little trick we do around here a lot with just a brick, and just lifts them up just so much that it keeps them in the winter from freezing and thawing, and kind of, getting a little connected to your concrete or your deck or whatever. And then also it helps with drainage. So that's really important. And that's an important discussion to have, is then you've got to have some drainage in your pots. Most good pots will have a drainage hole. Sometimes they don't anymore. Sometimes you've got to drill it through or poke it through. So always pay attention first to, do I have drainage here? You can put drainage in. You can put a little bit of gravel in the bottom. If you're lifting up on feet, then you're kind of making sure that that hole can actually breathe and that things can flow out. So that helps a lot, because oftentimes you'll get the hole kind of stopped up. You can even take a little broken terracotta pot, we call those shards that you kind of throw in the bottom, and that will help a lot with drainage. And then once you've kind of chosen your pot and you know it's going to drain, some people even use packing peanuts. That's a great thing that you can put in the bottom, especially like on some of the larger pots I have here that are very tall. If you use packing peanuts, you can come up, depending on the size of the pot, you could put up to a foot or so of packing peanuts in there, and it makes them much more lightweight and does the job on drainage. Just don't use the ones that water causes to melt, because that would not do much good. Everything would sink to the bottom. But styrofoam packing peanuts, good way to recycle and reuse those. After you've done that, the next most important thing, and I think the most important thing in container gardening and in gardening in general, in plants, in anything, is your soil. And so I'll give a little lecture here, and it's my soil lecture. And if you've ever been in a workshop that I've ever taught here at Wilson's or anywhere else, the soil lecture isn't pretty, but it is, don't buy cheap soil. And I'm getting a nod from Adam over here because I don't have an audience that I can see, but don't skimp on soil. That is where it all starts. And without going into any particular bad brands, because there are some bad ones out there, I can recommend a couple of good ones. We sell some of them we don't, but Sunshine is a good mix. Anything made for containers is ideal. Black Gold is great. There's Fox Farm, Happy Frog, Ocean Forest, ProMix. ProMix is, if you're old school, then we all talk about ProMix, and we still use ProMix here. It's not as common as it used to be. The reason why is because it's a very much peat based, and it does hold water, which is great if you don't like to water. Then you want a soil that will hold water. But we can talk you through that, and any nursery that you go to should be able to talk you through that, some of the good soils. But I'm kind of holding soil and throwing it around while I'm talking to you. But there's a little test you can do, and you can't open bags in a store, but most nurseries I think sell good quality potting soil. But we kind of call it the squeeze test. And when you squeeze potting soil, it should push back a little bit. It's almost a spongy feel. And it's a good feeling. And anyone I ever have do this, at first they look at me like they want to put gloves on, but it's a certain feel that it's not all dried out and Just feels old sometimes, and that's cheap potting soil. And then also when potting soil gets old, which it does, you really need to keep those bags kind of sealed up. We tighten them down, take a piece of duct tape, close it off when you're not going to use it for a while. You can store it. Sometimes you can store it for a year, but make sure you really keep it sealed up. And you can even put it in a plastic container if you know you can't use it all. But good soil is critical. It'll have all kinds of good stuff in it. A lot of times there'll be a little fertilizer charge in a good soil. You can go organic, you can not go organic, it doesn't matter. We tend to, anything that we're going to eat, we go organic with it. So like the black gold natural and organic, or one of the happy frogs or ocean forests are really good if you're doing herbs or veggies, and even mixing those things with flowers. So if potting soil is cheap, it's probably cheap for a reason, and that's where you always start. Don't try to skimp right there, because that's your good starting point. And then you get into plants, and this is the fun part. And I've got, oh gosh, I don't know, I've probably got 100 plants sitting here, something like that, more than I can plant today. But what I did today is I didn't plan exactly what I was going to put in any of these pots, and hopefully that serves me well. But instead, what I did is I really just took a cart. I took it through the greenhouse, and I picked plants that I thought were pretty that I might want to use. And I really did that. No cheating. Now, definitely there are things that I like and I know how to use them. But I didn't put together any big plan designs. I randomly chose them. And in fact, I had someone else take a cart and go gather some of them for me. So I don't even know what I have here. So that's my disclaimer, actually, probably. So I think the point though is, what I always tell people when they come in to shop for plants is pick what you like, because oftentimes I'll get the question, I have this pot and what do I put in it? And the first thing that I say is, do you have sun, full sun? We would describe as 6 or more hours of direct sunlight per day. Okay. Or you have partial sun, which it's a little hard to determine sometimes. But if you know where you're going to put your pot, kind of pay attention to it for one day. See what time in the morning the sun hits it, and see what time the sun stops. And just give it a little bit of attention. And that way you're going to put it in the right spot. Now, the great thing about a container, you can move it if it's not where it needs to be in general, except for the fact that you wanted a pot there for a reason. So full sun versus part sun, which would be, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day of pretty direct sun would be a part sun situation. If it's the afternoon sun, 4 or 5 hours could be considered full sun, if it's a particularly hot spot too. And then, anything as you get into, just maybe an hour or two of sun, or even deep shade. I'll show you a couple of possibilities for a lot of shade today. So you've got to know what your sunshine situation is. And when you go shopping, have that in mind. Beyond that, you don't have to know a whole lot other than what do you like. I'm a big advocate of not over planning. As you can tell, I let someone else pick my plants, and I just kind of randomly threw things on a cart. And that was about 15 minutes ago. So, and I did that for a reason, because I want it to be authentic and what people really do. So I tell people, go through the greenhouse and choose plants that you like. And I let them have that experience. And then I can go back and maybe throw out a few of those things. You can make mistakes, but don't overthink it. The biggest mistake that I probably see people make is put one of everything in a pot. And unless that's just really how you roll and that's really what you want it to look like, I would tell you, don't do that. You're still kind of following basic design principles that would apply to anything. It would apply to interior design, floral design, any type of design, even anything artsy that you do. So you're still looking for a combination of textures and combination of colors and all that. And shape and form and all of that. So really, just as you grab things, try not to onesie twosie it. And of course, buying in threes is great, but like the spot I have here in front of me, I I don't know, this lavender sort of inspired me for this pot for whatever reason. This is Spanish lavender, but think about your pot, and you don't necessarily have to do uh, threes of everything in a container, but you've still got to create great patterns. In a pot this size, you just can't. Back in the day, and I'm going to go back and probably show my age. I'm not very tall, so I always say I look a little bit younger than I am when you're shorter. But I'm going to show my age, and I'm going to go back to let's say 1990-ish, and we even here we always did the traditional spike. Everyone's probably heard of a spike, and that's a Dracaena spike. And around 3 geraniums and a vinca vine, and maybe throw an asparagus fern in there. And I'm getting a few nods. So, and those are pretty, and there's a place for that. And if that's what you're comfortable with, that's great. But I'm telling you, you can create something way more spectacular these days because the palette of plants has blown up since 1990. And so there's so much that you can do. It doesn't matter your sunlight, it doesn't matter your container. You can really just kind of blow it up, and it's hard to go really wrong with great plants. Start with quality plants. A plant that's been tortured on a shelf somewhere is probably not going to become a pretty plant anytime soon. So, and it happens here sometimes. I'm not going to lie. We miss things and watering and all that, but we remove them. So you don't want something that's been sitting out in 36 degrees last week or anything like that. But start with great quality plants. Now, you may have heard that there is sort of this rule when people talk about containers, and it's called thriller, filler, spiller. And that's all great. And I think that it's a good starting point. I think it's maybe a little bit overused. And so it's okay if you want to follow the thriller, spiller, filler rule. And what that means is you have some plants in your container that is a thriller. I would call this cordyline maybe a thriller. Okay, so this is kind of what we would call line material in floral design, and it's going to give you some height and do a lot of work and look really cool. So this would kind of qualify as a thriller. Coleus, golly, I'll tell you, we must have 50 varieties on the shelf. I think Ruth, our grower, gets out of control with Coleus sometimes. I think last year she told me she got out of control with Coleus because there are so many. So that could be considered a thriller. Something in the pot, no doubt this lavender would be called a thriller because this is a Quasti. It's a Spanish lavender, and it's an annual lavender, not hardy here, but it's going to thrill you all the time. A filler, I'm going to go show you the most classic filler ever, and we still use these, but this is asparagus fern. So this is a filler. This is something that you put in your pot or in your container that kind of fills space. Oftentimes it could just be foliagey, and sometimes it could have flowers too. I always treat this is the euphorbia. So most of you are familiar with the diamond frost that's been around for a while. So this is my current favorite variety that is not diamond frost. This one's called euphoric white. And so it's just got a little bit different look. It's a lot more bloom than leaf as opposed to diamond frost. There was quite a bit of leaf and then just these little tiny dainty white blooms, but these are more clustery. And I treat this as a filler too. So the asparagus fern is fine, the diamond frost, of course, but the euphoric white euphorbia is great. Lots of things can be treated as fillers. Even coleus could be considered a filler as opposed to a thriller. So that's kind of why I don't love locking everything into that category, because then I find myself going, well, is this a thriller or a filler? I know it's not a spiller. So a spiller then is something like the most classic sweet potato vine. Sweet potato vine. This is Marguerite, Blackie, lots of varieties. So you can kind of choose the color that you want, what you're going for. I have one rule when I'm talking about sweet potato vine, and everybody hates this rule, especially people who want to put threes in. If you take, say, this pot right here, which is probably, I don't know, a 14-inch pot or so, and you put 3 sweet potato vines in that, you're going to hate your summer. and you're going to have sweet potato vine filling your whole pot and eating everything else that's in there. So I have a rule, it's 1 sweet potato vine per pot, and no one likes that, but I'm not kidding you, I do it even on a 24 or 30-inch pot. I just make that a rule. The other rule is if you can't stand it and you have to put more than one, then don't make them ears. Don't put anything in your pot that looks like ears. So that means don't put one here and one right across from it, or you won't love what you come up with either. So if you're a balanced person, we're gonna struggle a little bit, but it's okay to balance. If you want to do the spike and the 3 geraniums, you can make that work, but don't do ears. Okay, so we'll get on you for that. Um, so your thrillers and your fillers and your spillers, that's great. Keep that in mind, but don't live by it. If you feel like you don't have any design capability and you need to stick to that, you've got to have rules, then go for that. That will work for you and it won't fail you. It just limits you. So really go through the greenhouse, pick out what you love, and then start working them together. You can take your cart in the greenhouse, which I did not do. I literally threw them on top of one another, but you can take it in the greenhouse and you can almost kind of lay out your pot right there so that you don't overbuy and you don't underbuy. My favorite thing in the spring is people who come every day for like 12 days straight because they keep needing to add a little something more, which I love. And I think that's great. If you can make it to the nursery in one trip, then you're not that person for sure. And that's okay either way. So this pot is the one I said was probably, I don't know, about a 14-inch pot, and you can go any size. I'm going to pot up a couple of these cord pots, I hope, because that's a really nice 12-inch size, and that's common. I would tell you, container gardens are always really pretty if you put them in groups. So these two are a match. So even just the two look great together. There's a much larger size of this. I just couldn't put it up on the table. And then there's a beautiful kind of one that goes with this group that's really pretty. These are kind of a cocoa color that are gorgeous. And these are frost proof. So they can stay out well into November, but it's still good to bring them in. So I'm going to throw a couple of things together here. And no magic to this, honestly. Hopefully they end up beautiful. But you can see just putting this cordyline in here, and this particular one is Red Star, and that's a common one. It's got a nice wide leaf. There's some more narrow varieties that don't quite consume it. Honestly, this would be a beautiful pot with nothing else, but I would never do that. You can do so much more with it, but honestly, I don't have a ton of space left. So I'm actually going to add a little soil here because it's a little low on soil. I like to come, about 2 or 3 inches below the top edge of the pot. That's a pretty good rule. What you don't want to do, and I've been guilty of this before, is you don't want to just shove everything in there and make everything so tight, and then nothing's really going to have room or be really happy. So I love this. And then I'm just going to kind of depend on a couple of plants that I really like myself. This is a pot for full to partial sun. So full sun would be fine. Partial sun is fine. So this is fragrant heliotrope. And I love this plant. Number one, it smells amazing. You can be halfway across the greenhouse and it smells great. The other thing is that it attracts butterflies. Butterflies love it. So we plant usually a ton of this out in our butterfly greenhouse, which opens June 6th, actually. It's kind of it's our 3rd year for the butterfly house. And we have all native species of butterflies in there, but we'll have a ton of this in there and they just flock to it. They love it. They get their nectar there. So I use heliotrope constantly in containers. I love the deep purple, and it's really not a completely upright plant. So it kind of thrills and then it spills. And that kind of takes us away from that rule a little bit because it wants to do both. So the heliotrope is a great choice. And I actually am pulling it out because I'm going to tell you kind of another rule. The plants that you choose are important, but the way that you put them in is equally important. And this is probably the number one thing that I see people do wrong is put them in, you kind of angle your plants when you put them in. So I could put that in the way that I did, or I could put it way up next to that and kind of make it go in. I want to almost force my plant to kind of grow outward here. And it's just a little tilty trick that you do. And you end up with a prettier result in the end. And especially at the beginning, you get immediate gratification. You don't want to fill these too full. I tend to because I want it to look pretty right away, and most of us do. So it really just depends on how patient you are, and if you're entertaining and you need this stuff to look great fast, and just go for it. But don't get everything so tight that you're messing with roots. Another thing is on that note, roots are really important, and they're these roots are perfect. This is a perfectly well-developed root system. But if you've ever had anyone tell you to break up the roots, here's my opinion on that. This doesn't need any roots broken up. This is perfect. The only time that you really want to mess with roots is when they're bound. And that can happen. It's early enough in the spring that we probably don't have any plants that are kind of bound where the roots are bound up in there. But the less root damage that you do, the better off you are. So try to not mess them up, and definitely don't break up these root balls and shove and all that. I look like I'm shoving a little. And of course, I'm just using my hands. I have a trowel here, but I probably won't touch it. Nor will I touch gloves because I want to feel it. So I'm going to put this euphorbia in here. Hopefully you can see this really well. And then I'm going to find a coleus, I think. I really want to put this in there, but I'm not going to. I'm going to save it. So this is calceolaria. It's called, the common name, I guess, is pocketbook plant. And a lot of people are really obsessed with this right now because it's just cool. And they're beautiful. I mean, we've got like 3 varieties blooming on the bench right now, and they're incredible, kind of a lady slipper type bloom. But I'm going to look for something that speaks to me a little bit more. And I really love this coleus. This particular one is Gale's Delight, I think, Gay's Delight. And I love it because I'm going for that neon green, because I'm going to resist the temptation to put a sweet potato vine in this pot if I can, because it's only a 14-inch pot, and I don't want to end up with just sweet potato vine here. So I'm going to throw a Gay's Delight in here. And I'm not gonna put another one either, because I think one coleus is really all that this needs. And you can kind of see already here, and I promise I'm not particularly good at this. It's just the plants are doing it for me. So I've got a great combination that I just picked off the cart. So I already love that. I think that's a great combination. Everything's working together. Technically, I have a thriller, kind of a spiller, and maybe a filler if you want to go that route. I'm going to attract butterflies. I've got a great color combination. I might want to put a little pop of something in here. Thinking I might go with maybe a yellow lantana. So we've got coleus, we've got euphorbia, we've got heliotrope. Lantana, great plant, thrives in full sun, blooms its head off all summer long. The butterflies also love it. We plant a ton of this. Loves full sun. So this is an easy thing to use, and it's gonna be semi-upright, and then when it gets to a certain size, it's gonna drop, and that's okay. So it probably qualifies as a spiller more than anything. And I was going to put it right by the coleus, but just instinctively, I'm going to move it to the other side. And now I'm breaking my own rule because I'm putting one of a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to shift myself away from that. And if I have another heliotrope, which I do, then I'm going to repeat my heliotrope because I love it. I know what it's going to do. I know it's going to do a great job for me. And I'm not going to put it directly opposite of the other one necessarily. I'm going to off-center it a little bit. That root ball kind of came apart in there. I doubt you could see it because I'm kind of back here behind this. But the root ball did come apart a little bit, and I just kind of gently used my hands to kind of hold everything together. It wasn't as rooted as the first one was. So then I really just look at kind of what I'm dealing with here. and I want to do something else. And what I think would be really nice might actually, well, I could go any route here, really. This is Angelonia. Angelonia would be beautiful in there. And that's especially if I were not going to put this out in the middle of an area, then I could kind of create some height in the back. And I wasn't really planning on doing that, but I think I'm going to because I love it. I'm a little bit more of a pink and purple kind of person than an orange and red. But oddly, when I was shopping in the greenhouse a little bit ago, I did tend to grab a lot of oranges and reds. So it might just be that we have a lot right now. And if you can see in here at all, I don't know if Adam's able to zoom in, you can kind of see that I've got a lot of soil now because I put all these little root balls in, and there was a little bit too much. So I kind of scooped a little bit out and just threw it on my table here. I could go a little bit further than this, but if I were planting this for my house right now, I'd probably stop because that's all I need. The more plants I get in there, the more I'm going to have to water. And I think it's really pretty. The other thing you could maybe do if you wanted immediate gratification, having company, the asparagus fern, really, as long as this thing's been around, it still works. And that's why it's still around because it's easy. This is a full sun pot, and asparagus fern really is a shadier plant. But I'll tell you, I've seen it do great in the full sun. So you can just go for asparagus fern really about anywhere as long as you're watering. And it has a real, I'll show you this too. So I don't really consider this root bound, but it's got a really nice root system on it. And they get kind of these bulbous roots too, and those are holding a lot of water. So that's why, in general, you're taking a full sun plant or a full shade plant and putting it in the sun. It's holding a lot of water, so it's kind of able to handle a little bit more. So this could go in there, but it certainly doesn't need to. I'll just kind of sit it there, and I'm not actually going to plant it. The cool thing about it is you can sort of take the asparagus fern and let it pull through your pot, and then it even one fills everything. So this is really only it's a lot of different plants. One, two, the cordyline, the lantana, the heliotrope, the euphorbia, the coleus, angelonia, and asparagus fern. So that's a lot of different plants, but somehow I got really lucky and it doesn't look hodgepodgey. So that's what you want to avoid, is a real hodgepodgey look. And I'll tell you, all the plants that I put in, they're in 5-inch pots. They're about $5. The asparagus fern is not. It's in a 3.5-inch pot, but they're about $5 plants. So you've probably got actually the cordyline is a little bit more. It's in a larger pot, as you could tell. It's a big plant, so that's good. But you're probably looking at $35, $45 worth of plants in there, something like that. I didn't add it up, so don't quote me on that. But and I think you've got a really perfect pot right there with that. And that's a nice porch size. And then you could even come into this one in front of it that matches. And if I know I'm going to use these as a pair, I would just kind of think, okay, how are these going to work together? You could repeat something that's in there. Let's see here, what looks exciting right now. Could maybe do a million bells. Million bells is not my absolute favorite plant in the world, but it is this little tiny petunia-like plant. It's calibrachoa, so not a petunia at all necessarily, but that would be something that if you just wanted some interest to kind of flow over there, you could put a single million bells in there. Really, your options are kind of limitless. You could stick a lavender in there, like a Spanish lavender that blooms all summer, as opposed to the hardier lavenders that might not. So that combination works great. Wanted to talk just a little bit about thinking outside the box of annuals, because everything there is an annual. Really don't limit yourself to that. I grabbed a few perennials, and these are what I would consider staple perennials. Okay, so this is a salvia. This one's May night. Perennial will bloom its head off all summer. You do have to cut them back a little bit and maybe fertilize and make it flush out blooms. This is something probably, I know this plant has been for sale for 25 or 30 years. It's a hardy geranium. It's called Biokova. It makes a great plant in a container. So those are all perennials. We sell these in 1-gallon pots. And then another thing I just kind of grabbed randomly was this iris, which this is Japanese iris, and it just happened to be blooming. So it's gorgeous, but I didn't grab it for its bloom. I could have just as easily grabbed this with no bloom because it's going to add texture to this pot of perennials. All these would really, they might not bloom every minute of every month this summer, but something's going to stay blooming all the time. The iris is probably not going to rebloom, but you're going to have this great spiky foliage kind of poking up there through the middle or through the back. I'll take the coleus out of there since we're talking perennials. And I really just grabbed, I walked through our perennials and I really just grabbed 5 or 6 perennials that we grow a ton of that are the most recognizable. This is lamb's ears. I love it. It goes nuts in the garden. It's not invasive. It's just a very active grower, we'll say. And I love it. Kids love it. You know, it's called lamb's ears for a reason because it feels just like that. You definitely want to put it in an area where it's not going to grow up into other things that you don't want it to, but in a container, who cares? You can actually grow these all in a container and then plant them in the garden in the fall too. So, and then have them come back next year. So really, I didn't try to put together a great design on this, but really, you could do just about anything with this, and maybe even poke in a few annuals. So you could poke in a lantana. This one's an orange lantana. You could poke in, let's see. I guess no container garden workshop would be complete without, oops, that's not what I was trying to grab, without a geranium. So a geranium would work fine. This is a fancy leaf geranium. It's, you know, got a lot of interest. It's grown more for the foliage than it is for its bloom, but geraniums are worthy and lovely. Kind of have made a comeback actually in recent years. So this is a really great one. It's called Mrs. Pollock. There's one that's my absolute favorite called Wilhelm Languth, and it's been around forever. It's a variegated leaf geranium. So one of those could go in. Another great plant, not to overwhelm, but this is plumbago. And I'm mentioning this for a reason because I want you to think a little bit about tropical plants. And tropicals will do great in these containers too, in the heat. Okay, so I'm going to switch over a little bit because I want to make sure I talk about care. Okay, because I'm running out of time. Okay, so care, 2 things. Sunlight, we've already talked about, fertilizer and water. So how do you water? If you are a big waterer, then you can use soils that will hold less water. I don't water enough, so I want to use soils that will hold a lot of water. And the biggest thing is you have to fertilize. I would fertilize these pots with this is quick and dirty Osmocote. These will release fertilizer throughout the season. It's not an organic product. If you want to go organic, then go with something like Garden Tone or Plant Tone, Biotone. Those are all organic products, especially for herbs and veggies. You sprinkle your Osmocote right up underneath there, underneath your plants. It will release fertilizer every time that water touches it, pretty much, lasts a month or 2. And then you should liquid feed too. We like this. It's Jack's. You can use Monty's. Monty's is a Louisville company. We love it. You can use fish emulsion if you want to go organic, if you're doing herbs and veggies, if you can get past the smell. So lots of options, but the big thing to remember is use a granular or a coated fertilizer and then supplement with liquid fertilizer. And you should do it often, but here's my rule. Do it every time you think of it. Keep it in a gallon, milk jug or something like that. Keep it mixed up, the water solubles. And then every time you think of it, you give it some fertilizer, and the Osmocote or the Garden Tone is kind of an insurance policy. Okay, is it time to open up for questions, or do I have a little bit longer?
Yeah, a little longer.
Okay, good. So one thing that I didn't touch on really at all yet, but I'm super passionate about it. Yeah, we have a helicopter right at this moment, so that's great. Hopefully you can hear me. But my first love in plants is herbs. And no matter how I try, I can't get that out of my soul. And we're all kind of like that. Like Brianna's standing here watching, and I would say her first love is, or one of her loves is roses. And so when you get kind of into the world of plants, then we get very specialized. And people that work here at Wilson's, Frankfurt or Lexington, we tend to be specialized in, because we can't know everything. So for me, herbs are an area where I have a strength and I have a passion. So you can take the same concept of design and you can apply it to herbs. I brought up a whiskey barrel. I don't know if we'll be able to get that, but I brought up a whiskey barrel and I did not choose these herbs. Deborah did. I don't know. Brianna said, "What do you want?" And I don't really know. I don't even know what I have here. But this is a rosemary. This particular one is called Shady Acres. It's not one of the hardier rosemaries, but it's a beautiful one. It's a real lush grower. This is Burgarten sage. So as opposed to garden sage, which has a much more narrow leaf, this is Burgarten, big wide leaf. Our restaurant here is named after this particular plant, and that's true. So we always plant it right in front of sage at the restaurant there, just because that's what we do. We can't get ourselves to plant anything else. But I love Burgarten because it doesn't get woody in the garden. It is a perennial. And then this particular basil is a purple basil called amethyst. So you can see just those three, when you put those together, how amazing that looks. And when you're doing herbs, if you were going to do like we did a whiskey barrel just for the sake of being traditional, but plant in your pots what you want to use. So I didn't go about this as, putting all these textures together or anything. You plant the herbs that you will use and then make it work. So I would probably add a basil to that because everybody uses basil. And then can't tell if that's fennel or dill. Fennel. Yep, definitely fennel, which I never use. So I'm going to plant it anyway, though, because it's got the beautiful ferny foliage. Yeah, bronze fennel is a great one that looks beautiful in a container, but I never use fennel, very seldom. So that might be, the fennel will grow tall though. So you could really just kind of lay these into a whiskey barrel, or a half whiskey barrel rather. This is flat leaf Italian parsley. It has better flavor than the curly parsley. It does like a little bit of shade. Almost all herbs are full sun. Parsley's not one of them. So it prefers some shade. Mint likes a little bit of shade too, but of course will grow about anywhere. Brianna brought me a lavender just for color. I'm reading her mind. So putting a little lavender in there would be great, and it's edible. You can make great lavender cookies. Oh yeah. So here's an annual that you could mix in with an edible container garden, and you can get a lot of herbs in a whiskey barrel, and they just kind of do a lot of work for you. But this is nasturtium, so this is a great edible flower, and you can eat the leaves too. You can just chop it off and throw it in salads. So that's a great one, and it's going to kind of spill over the edge. Right now I have a terrible design going here. So I'm going to kind of I'm just working it from right now from a standpoint of what I want. And then I'll kind of lay them out in a way that they might work together a little bit better. So I'm going to put my fennel in the middle. That could just as easily be dill. Lemongrass would be a great herb to put in the middle. Yeah, lovage. Yeah, lovage is another herb that we love, but we never use. But it's a great herb and it grows nice and tall and it does really well in the garden. And I'm going to put the parsley somewhere where I feel like it's going to get a little bit of protection, maybe kind of tucked under the rosemary just a little bit to where it will prevent it from, or keep it out of the sun a little. And then look at that. If you put the Spanish lavender, this particular one is Madrid Lavish Pink is what it's called. But look at those two together. I mean, that's gorgeous. And then you throw in just a regular, this one's lettuce leaf basil, which is a sweet basil. It's not the standard Nufar. But when you put that in there, you've kind of got this limey, accent plant. So herbs can be beautiful and they're not as intimidating as everyone thinks too. When you walk into an area of herbs, there aren't blooms and they're not, screaming at you what to do with them. So it gets a little bit more complicated, but don't be afraid. Buy what you use, put them together and make them look nice. And it's not nearly as hard as it seems. it's just a lot of green. So, I could go a lot of different ways with this one. I'm not even going to plant it. But just to give an idea, we also grabbed a pepper plant and a little patio tomato. So there's nothing that would stop you from growing a tomato right in here. Just sort of arrange things in a way that works for you. I did want to show you this. So this is a cord pot. These big, beautiful urns. And we just actually took this cord pot and we're just dropping it in. We cheated, we put bricks in the bottom. So bricks are kind of holding that up. And that way you don't have nearly as much soil, which also can mean more watering, but you don't have as much soil, but it's a really workable plan and it's not quite as much work. And you can even buy one of these things pre-done or just plant up the cord pot and then whoop, drop it in. Brianna kind of stuck these here. This is a tricolor sage, which is a great sage. It's more ornamental, but it's a good one. And oh yeah, here's another great one, pineapple sage. This one is a really limey leaf. And then this is sorrel. This is a red vein sorrel. It's not the French sorrel. So you can go anywhere that you want to go with that. So we've covered herbs, we've covered annuals, we've covered perennials, and then you can mix any of those things. And so, the basic rules are choose your pot, don't buy cheap soil. And if you have cheap soil, put it out in the garden and get some good soil that's made for container gardening. Fertilize a lot, water properly. And that's hard. I know that's easy for me to say. There are products if you're going to be gone, if you're not going to water a lot, soil moist, you can mix into your soil. A lot of these soils, like this is a great soil. If you kind of watch this, you can almost see it kind of sponging back at me, it's kind of pushing back at me, and that's great soil that's perfect for planting. But they have wetting agents in them oftentimes, so that's great for someone who doesn't like to water. For overwaters, it's not as good. Sometimes I can't really tell anyone how often to water a plant. We try to avoid giving anyone that rule. There's another helicopter. So we try to avoid, I think we're actually really close to the National Guard here. We're in the Capitol, right? So the National Guard's right here. So there must be something going on with them. But it's hard to have a rule of how often to water. Some plants here, we water every day. Oh, yeah. Use, stick your hands in there. I don't think I've stopped moving my hands for 45 minutes. That's just when you work with the dirt, you work with plants, you want to feel them, you want to touch them. And so get your hand in there. You can get a moisture meter. It's kind of overkill in my opinion. Let your container give you clues as to what it needs, and just pay attention and you'll be successful. Are we at question time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good news. No one's able to hear the background.
Oh, great. Well, we can. We feel like there's a helicopter almost ready to land right beside us. Yeah.
Sorry. I can't hear myself. First question is it true that you can use diapers in your pots? Diapers, like baby diapers in the bottom of pots?
Goodness.
I think for water control.
Well, okay. So I've actually never been asked that question ever, nor have I. Have you ever heard of that? And Brianna's been here for 18 years too, and she hasn't. But I get where it's coming from because
it's the same sort of like absorbance wetting agent.
Yes, they have a wetting, something to hold water. So basically, the same thing as soil moist. I probably wouldn't recommend a diaper. I would just get a little bag of soil moist for about $5, which you probably could. If you have a plethora of diapers in the wrong size, then you could probably do that.
Soil moist is probably cheaper than diapers.
Right.
I've got 10-year-old, I can tell you that.
I would say so, but the concept is actually makes some sense. I'm not sure where you would put them. I guess in the bottom, but then that would really just make your pot heavier at the bottom, whereas soil moist can be spread through there.
I feel like it would make it
Yeah. So let's avoid diapers altogether. But I understand it's random, but I do understand where the question comes from. It makes sense, actually.
how do you feel? This is my question. I'm being personal now. Being selfish. Have you guys ever used any kind of drip irrigation systems with your containers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you can. We don't here. Even our we have some really big, nice pots that kind of the walk up to Sage Garden Cafe, and we don't even use drip irrigation there. But you absolutely can. I'm not so mechanically inclined. I'm much more function probably on a creative level, but it's worth doing if you're into that sort of thing and if it's important to you, if you're going to be gone for periods of time, absolutely. And nowadays, you can probably order that kind of thing, a little system that you can just stick in pots and have them taken care of. Now, on that note, anytime that you do something like that, that's automatic watering. We believe in hand watering because then you're putting your hand in it and you're feeling whether it needs water. That's the problem with irrigation. The only thing that we water automatically here are hanging baskets. We have those all on a drip system. But everything else here in our production greenhouses and in our greenhouses that you see and that you shop in, everything's hand watered, which is pretty laborious, but we think worth it.
Also is where you can find where there's issues with the plants.
Yep.
If you have insects, if you have funguses, like if you get into the system of not paying attention to
Yes.
it being watered, then you're not paying attention to everything else.
Yep.
That's true.
But it also doesn't mean, I think that it's really important to think through container gardening or gardening in general or growing plants as you don't really have to be a slave to your plants. You need to do it in a way that works for you and it needs to be simplified. And what I grow will not necessarily be what Brianna grows. I guarantee you she would have picked a totally different set of plants than I would have today. So it has to work for you. And you really kind of have to simplify. And we tend to hear, we'll tend to overcomplicate it because there's, I don't know, like 80,000 varieties here or something like that. And don't be intimidated by that. If you like petunias, do petunias.
Another question: should you change out and put new soil in your containers every year?
It's a great question. I should have answered it already. I did not. The best answer is yes. The other answer is if you can. And again, I say, you can't be a slave to this. What I do, and I shouldn't, I'm telling you all of the things when you own a nursery, the ways that you cheat because you work in the spring all the time. One thing that you can do to kind of cheat and get by, depending on the size of your container, is take out some of it. So if you can't dump that out, this pot is, 2.5 foot tall. I can't probably scoop all that out and get it out every year. Ideally, it's good to do that. But if I can get into this pot and I can come down a foot or 18 inches and scoop that much out and replenish that with brand new soil, that's a great way to do it. It's ideal if you do switch it out every year. Potting soil gets old. It really needs to be switched out. And also I mentioned that these soils have a fertilizer charge oftentimes, but if you're fertilizing, you're not dependent on that. They just give a little boost when you first plant. So do it if you can. And if you can't, do something that works for you. But if you leave the same soil in 2 or 3 years, probably not going to have great results, no matter how much you fertilize or what plants you put in. You're probably not going to have great results because the structure of the soil will ultimately break down and then roots can't breathe and things like that.
Other question: can perennials be planted in the garden after using the pot, and when would you plant them out in the garden?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to do a perennial garden and maybe even spot a few little annuals in there for just more lasting color, then go for it. When fall comes around, or even in the middle of summer, if you're tired, everything starts looking tired sometimes in July, like late July. But you can do it as whenever you want to. We typically want to plant our perennials in the garden, in October. You probably don't want to do it in December, but October is a great month. We're still actively planting perennials well into October and sometimes even November. So when things are looking spent, and as long as you've taken good care of them, you can go in there, you can kind of separate things out. It's always good if you're going to pull perennials out and you want to plant them in the garden, rather than go in there and really try to rip them apart, because now all the roots are like this. It's best to just take a sharp knife, like a nice serrated knife, and just go in there and literally kind of cut a root ball so that you're making sharp cuts and not pulling everyone apart.
So you're not ripping.
Yes. Yeah. Never rip roots. No matter what anyone tells you, unless the plant is pot bound, you really don't need to give those roots any damage. They will do their own thing. Just kind of very, very gently pull them apart at worst. But don't tear into roots. It really, a lot of times plants will survive that, but it just takes them longer to really get started because they're having to develop all new root systems at that point.
Anybody have any other questions? Don't see anything else coming up. You can even unmute yourself if you'd like. Jennifer should be able to hear you. I'm not sure if Brianna can. I thought she doesn't have it. You don't have to speak.
Yep, we can just barely hear you, Adam, since you're off
okay.
mic over there.
Yeah, I'm a few feet away right now.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions, so we have, I think we've looked through everything, but you guys must have done a good job if you've answered all the questions. Thank you all so very much.
Okay, thank you.